Good morning, Western Conservative Summit. How's everybody doing? Now, the one thing I didn't hear him talk about was my student loan. I don't really like that much, but thank you very much to all of you for the opportunity to be here today. There is no better place to be than Colorado in a great Rocky Mountain summer, but maybe a great Rocky Mountain winter or spring or fall. Well, heck, this is just a great state. We're glad you're here. Thanks to all of you for being here. As we're driving here this morning, I was reminded of my grandmother, a woman named Ann Gardner, all of her 4-foot glory. She knew that as we were growing up, she grew up in Denver, just a few miles away from here, graduated from Denver East High School. She knew that my dad would probably never bring us kids to Denver to learn to drive in the big city, because you all know that I live in that little tiny town out in Yuma. And she began to worry about us. She said, I don't think your dad's ever going to teach you how to drive in the city. So when we were 15, she brought us to Denver. She stopped on the interstate. She got out of the car, and she said, "You're driving." Now, back then, the ages of driving legally were a little bit different than they are today. But it reminded me of the tenacity that she had for life, because it wasn't long after that she made sure she took my sister and I to downtown Denver to go see the plays, to go out to restaurants to learn which fork to use, because back home we had one fork, and apparently in the city they had more than one. And I started thinking about how she raised her 2 sons on the windy eastern plains, coming from the big city out to that little farm community on the eastern plains, and what it meant when she met my grandfather and moved out there. And I became just filled with this emotion that I think that we all share today about our families, about our faith, about who we are. And that's this notion of gratitude. A notion of gratitude that I don't think we spend enough time in America talking about today. Gratitude for our country. Gratitude for our God-given rights. For those people in our lives, whether it's our family members, in this case my grandmother, or others around us who have invested so much of their time to make sure we learned. Because it's gratitude for our country and others around us that are truly going to hold us together as a nation. I believe that conservatism, true conservatism, is built on gratitude. Gratitude for those blessings that I've talked about. Gratitude for this extraordinary nation and the incredibly brave men and women all around us who stand up for our nation time and time again. Gratitude that we have the ability to pursue happiness. The happiness we find in families, faith, our work. Gratitude for the men and women like my grandmother who made sacrifices large and small for her family so that we could chart our own paths. We're all grateful in this room for the extraordinary nation that we have. And that gratitude is the core of what motivates us, how we continue to keep the faith, to keep the fight, to preserve what makes this nation extraordinary, and to continue to perfect this union. It's not a novel idea, this notion of gratitude. It goes all the way back to our founding. One of our George Washington's first acts, our first president, first acts was to establish a national day of Thanksgiving. In his Thanksgiving proclamation, he called on all citizens of this brand new nation to give their thanks to God, and he wrote, "Let us render unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection, for the manifold mercies of his providence, for the great degree of tranquility, union, and plenty which we have enjoyed, for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed." Arguably, the other greatest president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, had the same idea. His Thanksgiving proclamation, however, came in the middle of a very terrible civil war. Even amid the bloodshed, though, Lincoln thought it was necessary to pause and to give thanks, and he wrote, the Most High God, who while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice by the whole American people. Both of these great American men made gratitude a matter of utmost national significance. But both of them knew all along that gratitude is not complacency. Washington presided over the war that founded America. Lincoln presided over the war that kept her from coming apart. Gratitude is freedom's preservative, but sometimes preserving freedom requires a fight. Those of us in this room know that all too well. That's why we're here. We're here because we know there are those who would undermine our freedoms, those who detest the nature of freedom in favor of statism, and that they will never rest. Bureaucrats in Washington unilaterally usurp our 10th Amendment rights as a state to enact laws that reflect the people's will. Internet searches reflect programmed and automated bias against mainstream conservative thought, trying to make controversial such notions as faith, educational choice, and limited government. Lawmakers recklessly squander the inheritance of our children and threaten the stability of our free enterprise system. I'm grateful to each and every one of you for all that you do to fight back against these and so many other threats to our freedom and our prosperity, because you all are part of the reason that we know we have important victories to celebrate today as well. Last year when I came to the Western Conservative Summit, we talked about the opportunities that the United States Congress was committed to, and we would pass a tax cut bill to benefit all Americans. And we did just that. I stood up here and I told you that we would use our majority to return to you what is yours to begin with. I said we are going to cut taxes on hardworking families, Americans, and small businesses that drive American growth. And that's exactly what we did. And I said that we would cut regulations, and over the past 2 years, we have cut regulations by over $80 billion, and we ain't done yet. We've continued to roll back regulations that put a boot on the throat of American economies and businesses around this country. We've passed legislation to make it easier for banks to get money back into their community, rolling back burdensome regulations that the Obama administration put in place, making it easier for businesses to start a business. Because we know what happened during the Obama years. We saw more businesses going out of business than businesses starting. That's not who we are as a country. We've also been able to do more than just tax reform, because we've recommitted our party to this idea that when we put conservative judges on the bench, our Constitution will be upheld. 3 words: Justice Neil Gorsuch. When we do this, when we accomplish limited government to get Washington out of the way, to let America work, we know that we have a country that is not only great, but that will continue to be an America on the rise, and a world that looks to us with that exceptional notion in mind. And indeed, America, we are rising again. America is back, and we are mighty. Our strong leadership in the face of tyranny in North Korea has resulted in fruitful peace talks on the peninsula for the first time since the Korean War. Thanks to our fearless heroine at the United Nations, Ambassador Nikki Haley, and the strong leadership of President Trump and the administration, global menaces like Kim Jong-un are recognizing strength and beginning to stand down. After nearly a decade of feeble and failed attempts to make nice with dictators, America is respected again on the world stage. We don't have to live under a foreign policy of strategic patience when we can show the strength and maximum pressure of the United States. And I talked about judges. Back home, we are appointing judges again who respect the rule of law, who will not make the law. Judges who view themselves as guardians of the Constitution, as our Federalist Papers so clearly stated. Working together, the Senate and our President have confirmed a record number of judges to federal benches from coast to coast. You have to go back over 100 years to see more circuit judges nominated by a first-year president. These judges are young. These judges are principled jurists who believe in the principle that James Madison talked about, who talked about the importance of that guardianship of our Constitution. And when Americans went to the voting booth in this last election, they made one thing clear: those judges matter. Americans were tired of judges litigating from the bench in order to advance their own ideological pursuits and agendas. Americans made it plain that they wanted principled jurists again, and we heard you. We are filling a pipeline with judges who want to be a judge in not a resolution of a cause for them, but the cause of our Constitution. These judges will shape our country for generations to come, and we should be proud of the work that's being done. But that's why our next fight is so important. Because there's only one body that confirms judges, and that's the United States Senate. We have the potential to confirm scores more of these constitutional judges, but we have to keep the Senate. The media knows this. The media is afraid of this. And that's why they want us to fail. They're already writing their stories. You can see it in the news. They don't want just to think that we're going to lose the House and the Senate, but sometimes I get the feeling they're cheering it on. This past election was a rebuke of their narrative that our movement is on the outs, and it was a rebuke of the notion that conservatism is expiring, because it's not. We're stronger than ever. Election after election has proven it. And while we celebrated victories in 2016, there was a dark side to that election. A dark side that we in this room, each of us, everyone in the conservative movement, must recognize. Even as Hillary Clinton lost, we must address it. The most dangerous thing to happen in America in the 2016 presidential election was Bernie Sanders' normalization of socialism. Bernie normalized socialism for a broad set of the electorate, mainly young voters. A generation of young voters who have never lived through an era where the evils of socialism played out in Eastern Europe night after night after night on the evening news. They didn't see the socialist boot on the neck of hardworking people in once prosperous nations. They didn't see people clamoring to be free from the grip of the Iron Curtain. And today, they're not seeing what should be wall-to-wall coverage of the once prosperous nation of Venezuela buckle under the undying weight of socialist ideology. President Trump was right. Venezuela isn't a failed example of socialism. It is socialism at work. As Americans, we used to be able to point to socialism as a fringe element of the left and treat it as something that would never be accepted by the country, this country founded on liberty and freedom. We took it as something to mock and to say, well, now they've gone too far. We know they've gone too far. But Bernie Sanders changed that. Bernie's successful hostile takeover of the Democratic Party means that his policies are now used as a litmus test for Democratic candidates. Across the country, in primary after primary, Bernie Sanders' acolytes have run for and in some cases won the primary nomination for their parties. They are in Colorado too. It's easy to dismiss this as politically advantageous to the right. That's because the thinking went, they nominate a radical, the more likely we are to win a general election. But we know that that mentality is lazy. We must take this threat seriously, because it burns the candle lit for freedom at both ends if we ignore it. Because the chances are, on election night, some of these socialists will win and be elected to state, local, or even federal office. Once this happens, the normalization of Bernie Sanders' brand of democratic socialism will be complete. Socialism will have gone mainstream. Candidates will be held to this new standard on the left. And then it will be our system versus their system, and some of their policies will prevail. And our government as we know it will have changed. And how fight we must to roll those changes back. As conservatives, we believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We believe in what Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers fought for all those years ago. We believe in hard work and the ability for a man or woman to pull themselves up and to achieve their own American dream. But socialism, its teachings of redistribution and government mandates, they don't coincide with that American dream. In fact, it actively destroys them. I know this, and I know you do too. We all know the threat and risk of socialism. Our parents and grandparents talked to us about it. They taught us the dangers. They told us the stories about once great nations falling into desperation and despair because of socialism. And it's incumbent upon us now, here today, to make sure that we are teaching the next generation of Americans that danger just as our parents taught us. It's upon us to be the standard bearers of liberty and to never let that socialism take root. Never. And when we do this, I know that our movement's best days lie ahead. Because we are people who have always written our own story. We came together when the nation was coming apart, an unlikely alliance of businessmen and abolitionists. Today we are still a big tent, and the canvas under which we gather is the belief that it is the individual men and women together in our work, in our families, in our houses of worship, who build up this nation and make it great. It's the fruits of our hard work, of individuals that drive our economy forward. It is nurturing homes and loving parents who educate and build up the next generation of great American citizens. It's our free and pluralistic cultural and religious institutions that bring people together. Democrats want people to believe that all of this is the government's job. Conservatives believe that the government's job is to stand down, to step back, and to ensure that we, the people, have the right to continue to work hard, to raise our children, and to live our lives in freedom. The government's most important job is to protect each and every American when they lay a stake and a claim to a piece of the American dream. It's worth remembering that it was the Republicans, after all, who passed the Homestead Act. Democrats were against us then, too. But Republicans have always believed that prosperity is not a zero-sum game. And we succeeded. We succeeded. And the eyes of the nation turned to the west, to Colorado. The Homestead Act opened a new chapter in American history, one where big dreamers set off to claim a piece of the earth for themselves, for their families, for the children and grandchildren they hope to have. Parts of the unsettled West, places like where we stand now, were built up by the visionaries who wanted to create something. They felt emboldened to do so because they knew government would protect what was rightfully theirs. Men and women like my great-great-grandparents moved west not long after the act passed, staked out their own piece of land, and with it, all their hopes and dreams for a life in that new land and for the dreams to come. And when you're on your way home, I want you to think about the car that you're in, the street light that you see, the airplane that you notice overhead. And know that these great technological revolutions of our time, the phone in your pocket, the email that you send, the FaceTime you're speaking with your relatives to, those innovations came from a great nation dedicated to empowering and bettering our people. But it wasn't just any nation. It was the United States of America that gave these technologies and these innovations and these opportunities to the world. And through our efforts, the hard work and innovations of the creative American people, we have made this world a better, greater place. And I know that those dreams that come when we stand up and fight for what we believe in, that liberty and freedom that made this nation great, that we can continue those blessings of liberties, those opportunities, those things that make lives better and empower people will continue to be spread around the globe thanks to the dreams of the people in this great country. I'm here today because of these dreams, and for that, I have eternal gratitude. That gratitude is what I take with me next week when I head back to Washington, where I will not rest in fighting for each of you, every one of you, and the rightful claim to your share, to our share of that American dream and an America that will always be on the rise. God bless the Western Conservative Summit. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. And let's remember this. We have a great nation because we believe this nation is always worth fighting for. God bless you all.